If you read pieces about you, pieces of press, profiles, stuff like that from the 80s and 90s, even a little bit in the 2000s, you were often portrayed as miserable.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. Yeah.
At 78, David Letterman stands at a strange crossroads. To millions, he is a comic genius who rewrote late-night television. To himself, he is a man marked by choices that still sting.
I'm the kind of fellow that, where are my car keys? And you can't do that if you're a pilot.
Fame gave him power, an audience, and a life many dream of. But it also demanded a persona he could not fully escape. In recent years, he has spoken openly about regret, loneliness, and the price of staying on stage for too long. Stay tuned as we journey through the tragedy of David Letterman's life. The rise of a reluctant legend. David Letterman did not grow up aiming for late-night fame. He was the kid from Indianapolis who liked to tell jokes, read the sports page, and hide behind a dry, crooked smile. That early shyness shaped his voice. Funny, distant, a little guarded. When he found radio and stand-up, the shield became a tool. His humor could slice, tease, and then step back. People loved it. In the early 1980s, Letterman blew up. Late Night with David Letterman arrived on NBC in 1982 and felt like nothing viewers had seen. He mixed offbeat bits, odd guests, and a tone that said he was in on the joke, and the audience loved being let in. He did not try to look like a star. He looked like someone who had seen too much and was still curious. That honesty made him fresh. His rise hit fast. He turned late night from a predictable routine into a place of surprise. Comedians learned to study his timing. Producers chased his style. Networks sat up and watched. With success came the trappings, pressure to keep ratings up, to stay must-see, to keep reinventing bits that had stopped surprising. The very qualities that made Letterman unique also made him hard to live with. He kept a distance from people as if the persona needed protection. That distance worked on stage. Off stage, it left a man with fewer places to rest. Many comedians who rise quickly feel a split between who the world sees and who they are alone. For Letterman, that split widened as the show grew. He had a platform and a voice few could match. Yet behind the jokes, there were small, recurring costs, lost quiet nights, missed family dinners, the slow hardening that comes from always performing. The seeds of the later unhappiness were already there, planted in success and watered by the demands of constant reinvention. By the mid-80s, David Letterman wasn't just successful, he was a force. His brand of comedy shaped a generation of late-night fans who loved his sarcasm, his unpredictability, and the way he made the absurd feel intelligent. But the more famous he became, the heavier the pressure sat on his shoulders. The cost of being Letterman. Letterman wasn't built for the emotional weight of being a celebrity. He liked control, privacy, and silence. Fame offered the opposite. Inside NBC, expectations grew fast. Executives wanted bigger guests, sharper segments, and constant reinvention. Every ratings week became a battlefield. And while many hosts thrive on the spotlight, Letterman was different. He often said he never felt comfortable with praise. Compliments confused him. Attention made him self-conscious. Yet he was expected to perform night after night, as if nothing bothered him. The rivalry with Jay Leno only made everything harder. What should have been a professional competition turned into a long, bitter chapter that shaped both men. Letterman wanted The Tonight Show, the crown of late night. When he didn't get it, the rejection sat deep. He joked about it, mocked it, and used humor to mask the sting. but privately, it affected him more than he ever admitted at the time. Many people close to him say that losing The Tonight Show created a mix of insecurity and resentment he carried for years. As late night expanded and more hosts appeared, Letterman felt pressure to stay ahead. He was naturally competitive, but competition drained him. Every joke had to land. Every show had to prove he still mattered. The audience saw a confident performer. The staff often saw a man wrestling with perfectionism, wanting every detail controlled, every moment sharp. Success didn't soften him. Instead, it made the walls around him thicker. The persona, the dry, distant, sardonic Letterman, grew stronger than the man behind it. That Letterman was brilliant, but he wasn't whole. He protected the real David with humor, irony, and a kind of emotional armor that worked on television but made real connection harder. Fame gave him everything he dreamed of, yet it also carved out a space inside him where worry, envy, and self-doubt quietly lived. And the more popular he became, the harder it was to silence that voice. When David Letterman moved to CBS in 1933, it looked like a victory. After losing The Tonight Show, he finally stepped onto a new stage with a bigger budget, a prime slot, and a network ready to make him their late-night king. The CBS years. The Late Show with David Letterman launched with huge excitement, and for a moment, he felt like he was getting the fresh start he deserved. But stepping onto a new stage didn't erase the old wounds. If anything, it puts them under brighter lights. With CBS came a massive responsibility. Letterman was no longer the cool, alternative host on NBC. He was the face of a major network's late-night identity. Everything he did mattered more. Every joke was judged harder. The freedom he once had to experiment now carried risk. Ratings were tracked like blood pressure. Every tiny dip became a conversation. He delivered, of course. The show was strong, smart, and full of memorable moments, but the pressure never relaxed. Behind the scenes, the demands of the job began to reshape his personality. Staff members have often described him as brilliant but intense. He wanted things done a certain way. He cared deeply about the show, sometimes to the point of obsession. He could be distant, sharp, or impatient, not out of cruelty, but out of fear that the show might slip. Letterman's perfectionism made the show great, but it also drained him emotionally. As the years went on, carrying the crown became heavier. New competition appeared. Conan O'Brien grew in popularity. Jon Stewart redefined political comedy. Late night was changing, and Letterman sometimes struggled to adapt. He was naturally self-critical, and watching younger hosts innovate made him worry about losing relevance. He joked about it, as always, but the insecurity grew beneath the surface. Then came the moment of uncomfortable honesty years later, when Letterman said, "Show business made me a worse person." It was a rare admission, simple, direct, and heavy. He wasn't talking about scandals or drama. He meant the constant grind, the pressure, and the way success had shaped his reactions, his relationships, even his sense of self. Despite the awards, the fame, and the cultural importance of The Late Show, Letterman often felt disconnected from happiness. The audience saw a legend. He felt the weight of keeping the legend alive. The crown was never the comfort he hoped it would be. Instead, it became a silent burden, worn every night under the studio lights. Scandals, regrets, and pubic scrutiny. For most of his career, David Letterman kept his personal life sealed tight. He joked about everything, including himself, but rarely let the world see the real man behind the desk. That changed in 2009, when a scandal broke that forced him into a kind of vulnerability he never expected or wanted. The story hit like a shockwave. Letterman admitted, on air, that he had been involved in relationships with women who worked for the show. It was a moment no one saw coming. His tone that night was serious, almost flat. He looked shaken. He told the audience the truth before the tabloids could twist it. But even with honesty, the impact was huge. The public saw the confident host stumble. His fans were stunned. His critics were louder than ever. What people didn't see was how deeply the scandal affected him internally. Letterman has spoken openly about the shame he carried afterward. He said he felt humiliated, not because the world found out, but because the situation forced him to confront a version of himself he didn't like. He hurt his wife. He damaged trust. And he realized how fame had made him careless with his own life. For a man who valued control, this loss of control cut deeply. He apologized publicly, but the private repair work was harder. His marriage survived, but the weight of that betrayal stayed with him. He once admitted in an interview that the scandal changed him more than any career moment. It made him quieter, more reflective, almost haunted by the idea that he had become what he never wanted to be. The pressure from the media only added to the burden. Headlines dissected his marriage, his behavior, his character. People debated whether he deserved forgiveness. That period exposed him in a way fame never had. The television host who built a career on being emotionally guarded suddenly had his most personal mistake displayed like a spectacle. Years later, Letterman still talks about that period with a heavy tone. He knows the scandal didn't end his career, but it marked him. It softened him in some places and hardened him in others. The beginning of tragedy. As the 2010s moved forward, something in David Letterman began to shift. He was still sharp, still funny, still capable of delivering a monologue like no one else. But behind the familiar rhythm, there was a tiredness he couldn't hide. Viewers sensed it. Staff members noticed it. And Letterman himself admitted years later that he was struggling far more than anyone knew. He talked openly about dealing with depression. It gave him purpose. But as he aged, that purpose started to feel heavier. Each night felt like carrying a weight that grew with time. He once said the hardest part wasn't telling jokes, but pretending he was still the same person he had been in the 19. The late-night landscape was changing too. Younger hosts were rising. Social media was shifting the culture. Letterman, who once defined cool, now felt out of place in a world moving faster than he could enjoy. He respected the new generation, but the shift made him question his own relevance. He wondered if he was becoming a relic, a reminder of a different era. For a man who spent his life chasing innovation, this was difficult to face. The show had once been the place where he felt most alive. Now it sometimes felt like a reminder of who he used to be. He confessed in an interview that he stayed too long, that he didn't know how to walk away. That fear of losing identity kept him in the chair long after the joy began to fade. The final years at CBS were a quiet unraveling. Nothing dramatic, nothing scandalous, just the slow realization that the performance was taking more from him than it gave. Letterman stopped hiding his exhaustion. He grew more honest, more reflective, almost melancholic at times. It wasn't bitterness, it was acceptance. When he finally announced his retirement in 2015, the atmosphere felt strange. Viewers celebrated him. His team honored him. But he later revealed he didn't feel proud. He felt empty. He didn't know who he was without the show. The identity he built for 33 years vanished overnight. Depression doesn't always show itself as tears or breakdowns. Sometimes it looks like a legend walking off a stage, unsure of the world waiting behind the curtain. For Letterman, stepping away wasn't freedom yet. It was the beginning of a long, complicated emotional adjustment, one he wasn't fully prepared for. Rebuilding his life. After leaving Late Night in 2015, David Letterman did something surprising for a man who spent his life in front of cameras. He disappeared for a while. The first photos that surfaced of him with a long gray beard went viral. People joked about it, calling him unrecognizable. But the beard wasn't a stunt. It symbolized a man stepping away from an identity he no longer needed. For the first time in decades, he wasn't required to be Letterman. He could simply be David. Those early quiet years were a reset. He spent more time with his wife and his son. He focused on small routines instead of nightly monologues. He rediscovered silence, the kind he couldn't access in a studio filled with laughter and pressure. He has said in interviews that the slower pace made him feel more human, like he was finally learning how to live rather than perform. But rebuilding a life after fame is complicated, even with peace. There was also sadness. Letterman often reflected on how much time he had missed. School moments, ordinary evenings, simple conversations, things he traded for studio lights and deadlines. He once admitted he didn't know how to be a present father until much later in life. That regret followed him into these quieter years. Still, there was growth. His Netflix series, My Next Guest Needs No Introduction, helped him return to television on his own terms, calmer, gentler, more open. The long-form conversations allowed him to show a side of himself he had hidden for decades. Viewers saw empathy, curiosity, and vulnerability. Living partly in Indiana, partly in New York, he embraced a slower lifestyle. He fished, he walked, he talked less and listened more. And yet, even in this peaceful chapter, he carried the awareness of mistakes he could never undo. Peace didn't erase regret. It simply gave him space to understand it. Letterman wasn't rebuilding his career during these years. He was rebuilding himself, piece by piece, quiet moment by quiet moment, learning what life looks like when you no longer need an audience to feel whole. David Letterman in his 70s. By the time David Letterman entered his 70s, something in him had softened. Not weakened, softened. The sharp edges that defined his early career were still there, but now they sat beside a quieter, more reflective man. He started speaking honestly about aging, regret, and the strange emptiness that comes when the applause fades. These weren't dramatic confessions. They were simple truths from someone finally ready to look back without hiding behind jokes. Letterman often says he wishes he had been a kinder man when he was younger, softer with people, more patient, less guarded. He admits that he pushed people away because he didn't know how to be close. He was always performing, even off camera, and didn't realize how much that cost until the years passed. One of the heaviest reflections he shares is about his son. He loves him deeply, but he regrets missing so many moments because work consumed his life. There's a sadness in the way he talks about it, not dramatic, just honest. He knows he can't get those years back. Time moves only in one direction, and for a man who spent decades racing ahead, realizing he missed the slow, beautiful parts of life, hits hard. In interviews, Letterman talks more openly about mortality. He jokes about it in the dry way he always has, but there's a seriousness beneath the humor. He knows he's closer to the end than the beginning. He knows he spent most of his life under studio lights instead of sunlight. And he knows the legacy he built, massive, groundbreaking, admired, doesn't erase the personal moments he lost. There's also the loneliness that fame leaves behind. When you're no longer on TV every night, let people drift. The world moves on quickly. New hosts take the spotlight. Younger audiences barely know the legend you once were. Letterman feels this shift. Not with bitterness, but with a quiet acceptance. It's part of life. Every era ends. Still, that transition is painful. Imagine being the center of a cultural conversation for 30 years, then waking up one day and realizing that conversation no longer includes you. That's a grief few people ever experience. It's not failure, it's simply the emotional cost of a long career. At 78, Letterman carries the weight of everything he built and everything it cost. His reflections aren't complaints. They're reminders that success never protects anyone from regret, aging, or the longing for a different version of the past. And that honesty, raw, late, and real, may be the most human thing he's ever shared. To the world, David Letterman is a legend. He changed late-night television forever, influencing comedians like Conan O'Brien, Stephen Colbert, Jimmy Kimmel, and countless others. His style, ironic, unpredictable, and smart, became the blueprint for a generation. Clips of his best moments circulate endlessly online. Awards, accolades, and fan admiration all cement his status. In the public eye, he is untouchable. So what is his legacy? His legacy. But Letterman doesn't always see it that way. He has admitted that fame and influence never made him feel complete. Even at the height of his career, he often focused on what he lacked, instead of celebrating what he achieved. The applause, the cultural dominance, the impact on comedy, none of it could fully quiet the doubts inside him. To him, the David Letterman the world praises is only part of the story, and sometimes it's not the story he wants to tell. There's a bitter irony in this. Millions admire his career and genius, yet the man himself measures success differently. Legacy for Letterman isn't awards or viral clips. It's moments he missed, relationships strained, and choices he regrets. He worries that history will remember the persona and forget the person. He wants people to see more than the jokes, more than the laughs. He wants them to understand the human behind the spotlight. Yet even in this quiet struggle, his influence is undeniable. He reshaped comedy, late night, and the way hosts connect with audiences. New hosts study his timing, his approach to interviews, his ability to balance absurdity with sharp wit. And though he sometimes downplays it, Letterman knows that his work lives on, whether he fully embraces it or not. The tragedy of his legacy is subtle. It's not that the world doesn't respect him. It's that he doesn't feel the comfort of that respect. For a man who gave so much of himself to entertain others, the greatest acknowledgement comes from inside. And that is where he remains quietly restless. The legend is immortal, but the man behind it is still learning how to forgive himself for the years lost to ambition, pressure, and performance. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and click on the next video shown on your screen.